Okay, our next speaker today is going to talk about a green manufacturing business that he started. Again, another example of a sustainable business developed here in Butler County. Ed Grieser is CEO and founder of HydroBlox Technologies, Inc., Pittsburgh resident, Penn State University, degrees in economics and finance, and he's specializing in groundwater control products, which are becoming increasingly more important these days. So, Ed, take over.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I, without a doubt, make the world's ugliest product in a really unsexy market, which is groundwater, and we make it from stuff that nobody else wants. So if that's what you lead with, okay, when you go for financing, here's a spoiler alert, it doesn't work out real well, okay? But anyway, we made it happen. Okay, all right. Okay, this is supposed to be a video, and I know y'all have vivid imaginations, so just imagine water running right through there. Oh, there you go. See that? It worked. You guys tried really hard. Okay. This is a replacement for French drains. Okay, so in other words, when you would have a regular French drain, you have that aggregate, you have that geotextile, and then you have that perforated pipe, and it's great. You dig a big hole, a big trench, and then it stops working between 1 to 7 years. So this is a superior replacement for that. We've been doing, oh, by the way, we have technical information to back up all these claims. If you'd like, I can email them to you. If you have trouble sleeping, I'm telling you, you're gonna be like in a coma state in about 2 minutes. Okay, this is why it doesn't clog up. This is a really interesting example. We were, the San Francisco Giants invited us out, and they were having problems with their fields, and then they looked at HydroBlox, and they didn't believe me, which is shocking, okay? So what they did was they created a plexiglass tank. It's kind of hard to see in the light, but there's a piece of HydroBlox there, and then they put the, what's in between the infield and the outfield and the warning track, that stuff is clay, okay? And that actually does come from Butler County, I understand. Anyway, and they poked a hole and they ran water in there for 4 months. And you can imagine how surprised they were when it didn't clog up, because that 4-month test was like 16 years of simulation. So they looked at this and, they liked it. They realized that it worked. Okay, and then the next year they win the World Series. Coincidence? I think not. Okay, so we do quite a bit of work overseas. We export, and when we were working with the UK, they needed some different types of testing done. So this is what's called a rapid scan, and it's kind of like an MRI meets an X-ray. And this would be the profile. So you can see this ugly piece of plastic has multiple pathways for the water to get through there, and it's made so it's packed tightly enough that it doesn't allow the fines to get in there and clog everything up. Okay? All right. Now, the plastic we use to make this it looks like this, okay? And I'm not sure if you heard about National Sword, and it's where China has said, we will no longer take your scrap plastic. And the reason they won't take our scrap plastic is because, as a country, we do a dreadful job of sorting our plastic and recycling. And that's no way around it. But guess what? There's this little company out of Pittsburgh, hey, that can take all of that crap and we can make something that actually performs better than the product they're replacing. If you think about it, any sort of what you would call a green product that exists just because it's a green product shares 2 characteristics. One, it's more expensive than what it's supposed to replace. And number 2, it doesn't work as well. Okay, looking at you, light bulbs. Okay, and it took a while for those things to come up to speed, and that was only because it was a forced purchase. Okay, so what we also use this product for is for filtering, and that is very important right now. This is in Germany, I believe, and this is for one of the concrete plants called Cemex here in the United States. And they were charged by their DEP to clean up their water. We designed a system where we make this in different grades, and it actually cleans up all of that sediment. There's another example right there. There's something called NPDES, and that's something that everybody in this room is going to be impacted by. As a matter of fact, this is the height of irony. Today, in the Post-Gazette, it's on the front page now. And what this means in short, simple declaration, short, simple words, is that in the same manner that you pay your sanitary authority for all of your sewage, you're going to start paying another tax, and it's going to be your stormwater authority. The state legislature has voted this in. It's happening. It just found its way to Western Pennsylvania, okay? I was invited to the meeting that happened last November up at University Park when they talked about this. And the people that were attending the meetings were the consulting engineers, okay, and it was the PR firms. And this went on for 2 full days. And at the end of the second day, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The PR firms were actually working up a strategy where they can roll this out to you, and you're going to pay it, no way around it, based on your impervious surface. So in other words, if your house has a footprint of X number of feet and your driveway is X number of feet, there'll be a function that they're developing right now, and that will be what you're going to pay for your stormwater tax. So I'm going to come back to that in just a second, but the DCNR, along with Pennsylvania Dirt and Gravel Roads, they use HydroBlox alongside all of these roads to minimize that. A swale would be that ditch that's alongside the road. So what they're doing is they're using HydroBlox now to replace that really deep ditch that you would catch your wheel in. It didn't move the water where it should be because everything failed. And at the end of their testing results, we came in at about 1/3 the cost. And the reason was to put a regular drain in alongside all these forest roads, it was a 10-man crew. And they were able to use HydroBlox and a 3-man crew and do 4 times the amount of road. So we stretched their budget by, I think, a factor of 4. And this is just a before and after. We do a lot of work with all the pipeline work that's going on right now. Most of these pipelines were built by contractors that were out of Texas and Oklahoma. And Texas and Oklahoma is fine, except it's about as flat as that table right here. So when they came up here to Western Pennsylvania, Ohio, Eastern Ohio, West Virginia, we have these things that are called hills, okay? And when it rains a lot, if the drainage isn't in place, the hill comes down. Just real quick, over on this photo on the right, you can see 2 vertical lines going up there. Those were the high pressure gas lines, okay? And they were exposed. We do a lot of work overseas, and they are very reluctant to use the word failure in England. They say everything is suboptimal, okay? So that right there was suboptimal. Okay, so this was one of our methods that we developed for taking care of that. Now, these are just a standard union crew sliding this stuff into the ground, and hand placement is actually preferable here because these hills are so steep, you can't get equipment down safely. And you can see that at the toe of the slope, this is what keeps the 2,000-foot slope from falling down. And side note, the guy there on the left standing there like that, he's from West Virginia, and he told me those hills aren't as steep as I think. So I don't know, it's some... Okay, and this is after. Now this is what we were talking about, the stormwater fees. Okay, so I was invited by the DEP to Harrisburg when, this was a couple years ago, when they were talking about rolling out this program. And I went, and I sat quietly, and the DEP explained the way the fee structure is going to work and, who's responsible and so on. And so then the county managers, the consulting engineers said, so what can we do to mitigate this? What do we tell people when they say, how do we solve this problem? And then all you heard were crickets, okay? And so that was the end of the meeting. So I got to see a meeting with people that were very upset, and then I went to leave, and then the folks from the DEP said, no, you wait. We've seen HydroBlox, and they said, can't you guys think of something? So I had a long ride back to Pittsburgh, and what I came up with was, now this was our first, this was a prototype. So what we did was we connected the downspout to that very long box, which is hollow and doesn't clog up. And what it does is it captures all that stormwater. It stays in that box until the surrounding soil is dry enough to allow it to perk out. Okay, so operating on the principle of forgiveness, not permission, I did this without telling the DEP. So then we sent them the photos, and exactly 18 minutes later, I got a phone call back from the DEP, and I saw the 717 exchange, so I kind of figured it was somebody from there. So I answered the phone, and the fellow from the DEP didn't even say hello. All he said was, "That's what I'm talking about." And I said, "Great, this works." And he said, I said, "What should I do?" And he said, "Nothing." So 6 days later, we got a letter and a phone call from the DEP that it was approved without further comment. That doesn't happen, ever. Okay, so we have taken this product, the in-ground swimming pool manufacturers, they put it under and around all their pools because I had never thought about this, but if you don't have good drainage underneath an in-ground pool, the water builds up and it stops being a pool and it turns into a boat, which again is suboptimal. Okay, we were invited again by the DEP to Harrisburg to talk to some of the senators about the problem with all of the increasing pile of plastic that really shouldn't be going into the landfills. And what came out of that was a meeting with SEPTA, the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, and I think they're the fourth largest transportation authority in the country. So what they are doing, along with CSX and the other Class 1 railroads, is they put HydroBlox, you can kind of see it in that right-hand side, they're putting it in and alongside all of the rails. And what that does is it pulls all the water out, much safer environment, and you're able to direct the water back to the swales to get back to the aquifers where it belongs. Okay, and that's one of the aftershots. There was a pond there that had been there for 52 years. This is down in Mulberry, Florida, at a chemical plant. We are also using HydroBlox now as the foundation around forms for the concrete form. So in other words, on the inside for your basement, they would have the regular wood for the form, and on the outside, you would have HydroBlox, and then that's your default drainage system that pulls all the water away. The point of all this is one of our lines, just one of our lines at the factory, takes 16 million pounds of plastic that nobody else can use because this plastic is what's called commingled. It's different types of plastic. It has paper on it. It may be wet. We took in 2 trailer loads of plastic labels that Pepsi had that they shipped all the way up here from Honduras because they were misspelled. Pepsi really needs to get a spell checker, okay? But that's a whole nother story. Okay, this is another thing that was absolutely amazing. Tesla. The people with the cars, well, they have another group inside them that's called Solar City, and they are the largest manufacturer and installer of utility scale solar fields in the country. And Tesla called us and said, "Are you approved in Maryland for solar panel fields?" And we said no. And they said, "Well, we're going to need you to send off an application." And I thought, this is great. We're going to do this now. On Sunday, my great-great-grandkids are going to see how this turned out. So but we sent in the application on May 1st. May 31st, 31 days later, we get this blanket approval. If you would ask them what time it is, they couldn't tell you that inside of a month. This was just another miracle. And we developed a new method because if you think about it, a solar panel is nothing more than a roof without a gutter. And if you have 50 acres of solar panel, then you're going to be generating a lot of water. And they're held to the same standard that you are for your house, where you're not allowed to let stormwater leave your property any faster than before it was developed. And then there's a pretty good example of what one of those big fields look like. And then this is the after. So what we told them to do was, now these things are closed off. We told them to leave HydroBlox, 2 inches of it sticking out of the ground. And then we had it a little off the drip line, which is where the water falls down. So it caught it, and then it moved everything off to where it should be, to the swale. Everybody was happy. And then that was the start of that. You can see a little bit right there. Now, if you notice the green, HydroBlox holds about 6 gallons of water for every 7.5 feet, and it stays there until it gets pushed out by head pressure. So in other words, everything around it will be dry because water moves from high head pressure to low head pressure, and it'll get moved down the board whenever it gets pushed by more water. So you can see, normally with drainage, you know where the drains are because it's all burned out. With HydroBlox, you know where it is because it's actually a little bit greener. And there you go. Okay. The other interesting thing that you can do with this is it supports hydroponic growth. So in other words, you can grow right on it without soil. And we've had testing done. They're getting 30% higher yields with 20% less water. They use them for green roofs. Penn State tested it, and the results that came back were there was nothing else on the market that worked better, and it was certainly a lot lighter and easier to work with. Okay, diversion, and this is what we were talking about. Kind of a funny story here. We were invited by the DEP to talk to the rest of the farmers because the end game for plastic in a farm is either it gets burned or buried, and that's not acceptable anymore. So we went there, and all of these bales, they said, can you use this film plastic? And we said, absolutely. And so we were set to go. So the farmers are ready to start bringing us all this plastic. And then we got a phone call from the other side of the DEP, and they said, we understand you're going to be taking in all this plastic. And we said, yes. And they said, well, what are you going to do with what comes with the plastic? And I didn't know what they meant. Well, when you pick up the plastic, it's been on the ground, and it'll have some dirt, and it'll have some rocks, and whatever else, and we shake it out. And they said, what are you going to do with that? And well, we're probably going to sweep it up and maybe put it out, in our field. And they said, oh no, that's a hazardous material. And that's how that project died. There you go. So we have, long story short, we have a customer list. We've been doing this for 12 years now. About 2 years ago, one of the fellows from True Value here in Pittsburgh talked us into letting them do retail, and reluctantly we did. But Ace and True Value have done a very nice. They've done a fine job for us, and they do a lot of residential work. We have contractors that do that work. But again, the guts of our business is really the commercial industrial side. The point of it is the compressive strength on this is 40,000 pounds a square foot. That's twice the load that you need to put concrete on the road. So this is porous, okay? So if you would have the porous concrete, the porous asphalt, this could now be the underlay that would allow that water to get moved back and allow it to go where it should. And that's where we're going with this, in the long run on this. Okay, well, it's been a long afternoon, and I know there are football games that y'all want to get to. So I'm going to leave you with one thing, and this was, I got to tell you, because this is the nicest thing I think anybody has ever said to me. Our equipment, within the plastic industry, you just don't go to Fastenal or whatever industrial store and say, I need one of these and one of these and one of those, and then bolt it all together and things work. It doesn't work that way. You have to fabricate it ourselves. So we had this giant machine go down with a wheel that weighed 2 tons, and we're struggling to get it off. Well, our facility is up near Conneaut Lake, and the good thing about that is there's plenty of people that are incredibly technical and just know how to do things like that. So we had the fellow come in, and they took care of it. And then there was something else that needed to be done. And the technician, the senior millwright, said, yeah, I'm bringing my boss. He goes, he's coming with me. And we have, our intellectual property is very valuable, and we just don't let people inside the factory. So the fellow signed a non-disclosure, and there was this fellow that had been running this business for quite some time. And he came in, and we did what we needed to do in about 5 minutes. And he looked at me and he said, well, I had to come over here and see this. He said, because our guy just hasn't shut up about this. And he said it's something that we need to see. So he asked me, no questions about how the machines work. He asked me all the questions in greater detail about what I just talked about. And he just looked at me and he said, yeah, this is really neat. So then there was a compliment in here, and it fought its way to the surface. So you got to hang with me on this. So we're walking out. I'm walking him out to the car, and I said goodbye, and I shook his hand, and he turned around, he looked at me, and he goes, there's something wrong with you. I'm like, okay. And he goes, but it's people like you that make the world go round. And I thought that was such a nice thing, from somebody that has been there and done that and probably has all the T-shirts. So anyway, well, thank you for your time. Appreciated the opportunity to be here, and thank you.
Great talk, Ed. Great example of an innovative idea that turned into a sustainable company. Ed, you were so great, I'm going to give you 2 tips. One, well, this isn't a tip, but one, Becky Lou Bowl is going to grab some volunteers, and all the plastic recyclables from this event are going to be dumped in your car because you obviously are going to need more resources. And 2, Talk to your clients and say, don't rely on the historical rainfall quantities, intensities. You can double your product.